Okay, I'll start.
So, good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Good evening to some of you who are joining far from the Eastern Hemisphere. My name is Yunus Khan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy, and I am delighted to lead this session as the 10th monthly LGMA COP27 webinar, which will focus on a debriefing of our achievements or activities in COP27. Those who may remember, this is a series of webinars that we have hosted since the beginning of the year, every month, and third Wednesday. As our usual practice this year, we will also, in the last part of our webinar, connect to Kobe Brandt, who is the Director of Cities Biodiversity Center from ICLEI, who will also share with us the preparations for the Biodiversity Summit in Montreal next month. So compared to the previous webinars, the other important point to remind is that this is recorded and it is later on uploaded. We recommend you to type your questions in the chat box or Q&A session during the webinar if you wish. But if it is extremely burning issue, you can also raise your hand and then we can flag that and invite you to intervene as well. Once again, who is LGMA? LGMA is the voice of cities and regions in the UN climate process. We basically are trying to influence the negotiations, that is, so that the results are serving for the interest of local and regional governments, or the inputs from local and regional governments can be heard in the negotiation as well. We are engaged with the champions in setting the action agenda, especially the initiatives and result-oriented partnerships. We try to collaborate with the presidencies of the COP because each COP is unique and they have their own style and priorities, and we do our best to support them. And we also work, advance our dialogue with the Friends of Multi-Level Action, which are the countries who are supporting the the topic of multi-level action in the UNFCCC space. Without further going on the background, which was usually our practice in the past webinars, just let me remind you that during COP27, we have issued daily briefings that was covering the negotiations agenda, our activities in the Blue Zone, but of course in the multi-level action pavilion. So you can read those mailings if you like to have deeper understanding of our engagement at COP27. Let's remember at the beginning of the year, we defined our roadmap towards COP27, and we said that we have to now evolve because we have asked for that time for multi-level action has come. Multi-level action is in the Glasgow Climate Pact, and it is now time to move to a new vision, which is multi-level action delivers. This was consistent with the COP27 presidency because they were designing this COP as the implementation COP. So we were aiming to have enhanced multi-level analysis so that especially not necessarily a new commitment, but rather the announcements that was made in Glasgow, especially Race to Zero and Race to Resilience, these should be incorporated into the NDCs. We'd like to underline that there is an unfinished business, that climate emergency is not addressed in the UNFCCC space, that we want to bring this, including loss and damage with Scottish government, the topics like food, culture, finance, circularity, lifestyles, or blue economy, or nature. And we would like to have the first ever climate and urbanization ministerial, as well as improving our relation with the Mediterranean and MENA region as well. If you remember, on the way towards COP in the last couple of weeks, we tried to streamline those priorities to more action-oriented, results-based advocacy strategy. And during the year, especially from June, we have been working heavily with the Surge initiative, that was led by the COP27 presidency. We wanted this to be endorsed by a broad community. After hearing that urbanization and climate would be in the agenda, we encourage parties to welcome this initiative. And of course, we want them to mobilize their climate emergency finance, including Article 6 and other areas, and loss and damage as well. So if we look at back, by the way, I have to also admit that this presentation is prepared in a relatively challenging condition, because the COP concluded already on Sunday, and there are still a lot of planned preparations in the summary of those outcomes. There are a lot of efforts to understand better all the decisions. Even the IST, Earth Negotiation Bulletin summary report, was released just this morning. So we want to keep this as a brief overview. So in the next couple of weeks and months, obviously, we have to have deeper understanding, as well as we also have focused this presentation a bit more text heavy, because we did not have time to go through this nice visual and photos, which was brilliant actually. That reflects the dynamism of the multi-level action pavilion and cities and regions in the UNFCCC space this year. So let's focus on the bird's eye view of what are the main things that come across depending on the outcomes. First of all, this COP was difficult. This was one of the hardest COP. Some say that it was really hardest, especially with the logistical challenges. But of course, it was also geopolitically a challenge. It was the first time Global South was hosting a COP. And of course, hosting a COP is not just a logistical issue, but also a political issue. It was truly a challenge for the Global South to say that we want our voices to be heard. And we are happy with Glasgow, but there are things that has not been addressed there. And we want this COP to raise this onto the agenda. So this was, of course, creating tensions, especially with the Russian war in Ukraine and the impact on energy and food prices. And in being aware, there are some countries who have started to backtrack because of their response to the war, especially in Europe, that even those who are most ambitious have started to introduce fossil fuel in some of their plans. So this created, of course, confusion and a question of trust among the Global South. This was, of course, impacting the relations. Secondly, if we look at the cover decision, which is called Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan, which is abbreviated as SHIP, and I must confess, the Egyptians are interestingly very good in abbreviations, because all the initiatives they have developed, most of them are very easy to remember, at least in terms of abbreviations. So this was something that they were very successful at. So in the cover decision, the things that strikes us at first hand is that there are unprecedented reference to food, nature-based solutions, as well as renewable energy. It is striking to see that in the Glasgow cover text, there was no reference to renewable energy. And this is important because on the last couple of days, there was a discussion whether phase out of coal or phase out of all fossil fuels. The final deal was that they did not use the phase out. They kept the phase down, but they referred low emission and especially a number of paragraphs has renewable energy as a reference, which I believe it is important. It is much better than I think that was expected. And these are in line with our expectation that if these topics are on the COP agenda, we can really go to the transformation, the climate emergency mode. Of course, we are sad and disappointed that the language on multi-level action did not go beyond what was in the Glasgow Climate Pact, and in some sense, one can interpret that we went even below its importance, because now it is one of the, and not in the preamble paragraph, but it is paragraph 51, action by non-party stakeholders. If you remember, the logic of multi-level action was that all levels of governments collaborating together. So if you limit it only to non-party stakeholders, the emphasis that multi-level action should also be a responsibility and a culture that has to be practiced by the national government is weakened. So I must confess, I am not very happy with the language that is defined in this way in the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan. More importantly, over these years, you may remember COP27 presidency had worked with us and so many other partners with so many other themes. They have worked on around 15 to 17 initiatives. We were all aware that some of those we will not have too long lifetime, but surprisingly, Egyptian government or Egyptian presidency was not able to introduce any of those into the text of the cover decision. It was for us a bit surprising because we were expecting, especially when we were discussing with the presidency, when we were planning for the climate and urbanization ministerial, we were aware that our event is at the end of the COP, and we were aware that at the beginning of the COP there will be a presidency text, and we were hoping that the language of the presidency will include reference to multi-level action or the surge or other ministerials. None of them was included in the list or in the text that was released by the presidency. Obviously, this was something that we were not expecting, and therefore we had to align ourselves, but it was probably too late. Again, none of the initiatives were reflected, but surge is, and some of the others, the ones that we have observed that this will be more long-term lifespan, are included in the COP27 Global Climate Action Agenda outcomes. So this is at least a bit positive signal. We will touch upon this, the action agenda, in the next slide in a bit more detail. Loss and damage funds, obviously, this was a unique and historic moment because for the first time in the COP process, as far as I can remember, an agenda item which was not in the agenda of the COP at the beginning, which was a mandate agenda now, has concluded in the same COP. This is not usual. This is really extraordinary. This shows how developing countries have really put this as a priority. And let's remember, for a long time, loss and damage was always championed by the small island states, especially the least developed countries. But this year, especially when the G7 presidency was led by Pakistan, the Minister of Environment of Pakistan was extremely skilled, but also Pakistan was really feeling the impacts of the disaster they have faced, which was vanishing 1/3 of the country. Of course, none of the countries can be compared. It's at the end of the life, but Pakistan's scale, politically and also geographically, size-wise, it was probably an alert, an emergency call, which made even the G7 and China to be more clear on that. Because you remember when Glasgow was deleting loss and damage fund, it was the Africa group who said that they can live with this. So it's a negotiations process. And interestingly, if you look at the loss and damage decision, if it is implemented in the way it is designed, or in the decision, it will take just 12 months for this fund to be established. They will have webinars, they will have workshops, they will have dialogues, and the goal is that this is announced at COP28. Again, this is extraordinary. Usually, remember the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, how long it took these bodies to be established. So again, once again, this shows how important this issue is for the developing countries. Secondly, the discussion literally have elevated itself into literally the redesigning of the global alliances. We can say tectonic changes will be seen in the global north and global south. Traditional groupings was Annex 1 or Annex 2 and the rest of the world, G7 and China. During the negotiation, especially when EU said that they are ready to invest, the first, let's say, break came from the Annex 1 country because the US was silent. They did not immediately support that. From the G7 and China side, Vanuatu or other small countries also said that yes, they follow this. And of course, EU had a negotiation position which says that I don't want to be the only one who's investing in this fund. So if you want me to support this, we have to bring other sources. So this was a deal that EU has worked on. It seemed to work appropriately. And the third point about loss and damage, and by the way, this tectonic changes, officially there's no change in the description of G7 and China, but you can feel the footsteps of literally a new multipolar world also being this was always an issue in the climate change negotiations, but it's becoming more and more powerful. And thirdly, the decision is particularly unique because it goes back to a discussion that is beyond the scope of UNFCCC. The fund will be receiving resources, financial resources, from non-UNFCCC sources. And there's a deliberate, let's say, not an attack, but deliberate focus to the current multilateral trade and banking system, including Bretton Woods institutions, including the global trade revenues. This shows, once again, climate community is literally shaping the future of our world for the good. Let's remember, in the 1990s and the 2000s, climate debate had first impacts to energy. So the renewable energy came into the agenda. Without climate change debate, renewable energy would not be going forward. Then came the technology, low emission fuels, low emission technology. So the technology is also advanced because of the need to adapt to the climate targets. But now climate community is going and it's elevating its focus and it's targeting to the multilateral trade and banking system, which is a big challenge, but it's a positive challenge because it is good that in the climate justice era, the current trade and banking relations should also be adjusted to a more shared responsibility and the spirit of the Paris Agreement. If we go to the global goal adaptation, there is a reference to cities, settlements, and key infrastructure, as well as tangible cultural heritage. Congratulations for our cultural heritage community. It is work in progress, but I think it's also important. I think the abbreviation for this is GLASS. Article 6, finance, was an important topic. There was a potential list of new non-market approaches. In that one, there was an entry for our partners in UN Capital Development Fund, which was addressing local climate adaptive facility. We still believe the discussion on the new market approaches will come again. So it's not over; it will come again, and therefore we still believe the overarching principle should be sustainable urbanization, and that local could be one of its first examples, one of its first facilities. Overall, what we can assess or what we can deduct from all this discussion is that the second phase of the Paris Agreement, we said that it will be starting with Sharm el Sheikh. In fact, it is started and it even went further in a positive manner because it filled the most important gap, which is the climate justice. So now we have COP26 ambition, we have COP27 climate justice with the loss and damage fund. Now it's really the full scale of climate regime to be implemented in the speediest way, but this needs more effort on finance, governance, and capacity building if it is truly successful. These are becoming much more evidence, and therefore our vision for multi-level action becomes even more important. For those who remember, we always come to the COPs in a let's say compendium of activities. We have in the blue zone our pavilion, multi-level action pavilion. We have UNFCCC, which is side events, but also interventions. We have this year particularly worked with the presidency and Marrakesh partnership. Then there are other blue zone pavilions, country pavilions or other partners. And then green zone. This year, green zone was relatively weak or relatively less active for us, especially because honestly speaking, we did not have too much relation with Sharm el Sheikh, city of Sharm el Sheikh, unfortunately, nor we did have any meaningful engagement with the governorate of South Sinai, although we have worked with them a lot in the past in the biodiversity COP. Governorate has always recommended us that we connect to the presidency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in order to discuss anything. So that was the reason why the green zone for us was very weak or negligible in this year's COP27. For us, our home was multi-level action pavilion. We are grateful for the huge collaboration with continues to be hosted by Scottish government, but in collaboration now with the Egyptian Minister of Housing, Egyptian COP27 presidency, and so many partners around the world who dedicated time and energy for us. Overall, at COP27, we are assuming that we have more than 500 LGMA delegation, be it registered from our partners or from their national governments. This includes around 150 political leaders, mayors, governors, and council leaders. At the multi-level action pavilion, we had hosted 50 sessions, but across the whole pavilions, it's more or less 100, 150 sessions, even more, as far as we can understand. So this was reflecting the diversity of our power of multi-level action pavilion. We are very grateful for the spirit across the constituency. During COP, our most important agenda was the announcement on the surge. I will not go too much on the detail because we will continue to develop it further. But surge is important because it is the first ever holistic approach to urbanization, sustainable cities, and multi-level action under the UNFCCC. And it's secondly also very important because just at this COP, we have also released the IPCC Summary for Urban Policymakers, which is giving us more evidence for working on cities. So the idea to bring urbanization ministers and climate ministers under the roof of the COP27 was a very worthwhile effort. The surge, which is now working on the 5 tracks and with more principles that is supporting these ideas, has been a fantastic mobilization of our partnerships of across the world. It is now more than 100 partners from national governments, global north and south, networks of local regional governments, UN institutions, and non-state actors. During the ministerial, important or very striking messages. First of all, Global South was, as expected, was always positive on this agenda, but especially from the global north, countries like US, who has said that the recently initiated the SCALE initiative for subnational action could have similarities with surge, or Japan, which is running international citizenship corporation for a long time, could consider a synergy with surge. Was always these were very encouraging signals, and these were the signals that give us the motivation that we are ready to dig into deeper, to make the surge operational, and to make sure that delivery is coming up. Of course, it needs resources, but the first signal was extremely positive. One of the surprising announcements came from multilateral development banks. On behalf of those multilateral development banks, EBRD made a statement saying that they are very interested. They really would like to support this through their existing funding channels, which of course is very encouraging, because such a statement didn't come from Race to Zero. Such a statement didn't come from Race to Resilience. None of the initiatives have received such a strong endorsement from multilateral development banks. Of course, when we are talking about financing of our efforts, the interest of banks is helpful, so that we can be much more solid and expect the more active collaboration with them. So these were very positive remarks from the initiative on the 17th of November. I must also confess, it was remarkable because it was one of the largest meeting rooms. It was the only one that was a kind of an action agenda, but it's in the UNFCCC negotiations. It was in the negotiations area. It was attended. It was a full house. There were a lot of people who were waiting outside. UN Habitat colleagues will make a report of the full deliberations, but it was an impressive demonstration of the power of urbanization and multi-level action. And I think the way we have approached this meeting, although it was a bit early in the morning, but while going through the COP27 Blue Zone, through a delegation of LGMA shouting and calling for walk to talk, was a kind of a motivation that we all have enjoyed, I guess. I will not go too much on the other side events of the pavilion or other launches for this round, because we still have to gather what was the concrete announcements. But I would like to underline here the LGMA delegations who have intervened at the COP27 in official negotiations. This includes the official opening, the discussions on the implementation summit, global climate action agenda, global stocktake, the youth day, high-level dialogue on subnational, high-level dialogue on finance, COP27 high-level segment, of course, ministerial, the global climate action human settlements agenda and its closing agenda, and UN Secretary General's dialogue with the constitutive focal points, and concluding with the COP27 closing. The reason I'm mentioning is that if you look at this list, it reflects fully our diversity in terms of gender, in terms of typology of our constituency, in terms of the regional diversity from Asia to Africa, from Tokyo to Lusaka. We had every voice heard, and I think this is something that we should be collectively praising, because that is also showing us that the more we make this kind of processes able to address all of our voices, the better our engagement in this process. And that's why tracking these interventions are important. Let me give you one example. Traditionally, high-level finance dialogue never had a local or subnational speaker. On the day of this event, suddenly there was an announcement came, and we immediately searched who is available at this site at that moment. And Mayor Sefiano, of course, he was also a champion for ICLEI, FMDV, and UCLG. He was immediately available, and he waited for literally 4 hours to deliver his 2-minute intervention. Again, Mayor Chauvet from Otun, in the last couple of hours, more than 12 hours on the 20th, in the early morning, he continued to stay there. He did not give up, and he made our voice heard. These are, of course, big sacrifices, and we are really grateful for all our leaders. Similarly, Mayor Daxma, especially when she was rolling out all this campaign, she literally have joined us in every step of our surge initiative. So this again shows the importance of our leaders being actively involved in the process. On the final days, as we said, the first elements text was released on the 15th of November. This was Tuesday. Let's be realistic. The evolution of this cover decision was also very, let's say, a bit stressed, not because of us, but the presidency. The way they released this text was really very short term, and the full text was released even on Thursday. So when we have seen that there is no reference to us, we immediately mobilized our resources. We proposed these 3 main ideas: urbanization in the implementation ambition of Paris Agreement, urbanization and multi-level action, surge and the ministerial meeting to be welcomed, and the Secretariat to label urbanization as a standing item in the UNFCCC topics. Unfortunately, let's be realistic, none of them have found their way yet. But let me take you, actually, this would be one of the last slides of my presentation today. When I was reading, because we were disappointed, surge was not in the COP27 decision, and I have noticed how now new announcements came from the Global Climate Action Agenda, the breakthroughs. I thought it would be good to go back to where did we come here and how we can go further, especially to really understand how things have evolved. We are talking about more than 10 years of the process. It started in 2012, when there was a discussion about raising pre-2020 ambition. And that was the moment where we came on board. We had the first workshop on urbanization in Warsaw in 2018. Sorry, in 2013 at COP18. Then it was followed by a forum at the SP. But especially in Lima, there was a backtrack because there was a huge resistance to this agenda to be official on the agenda, not just only cities, but all the stakeholders. However, when the Lima Action Agenda was announced, especially when nations agreed that there will be no compliance committee for the Paris Agreement or to the upcoming agreement, and that they will be able to use their national conditions to come up with any type of initiatives, they started to be open to those action agendas to nourish in the UNFCCC space. So from Lima to Paris, we have worked on this Lima Paris Action Agenda. It was mainly these mainly mitigation-oriented topics, transport, energy, and in our case, it was human settlements, buildings was a part of it, and as well. In Paris, we had the assignment of high-level climate action champions. So they were not aware there was a Lima Paris Action Agenda. They came up and they have developed together, and we were part of it in Marrakesh, the Marrakesh Partnership, which is again mainly sectoral mitigation-focused partnerships. And there, in 3 years' time, we have created or redesigned the Human Settlements Group in two working groups. One is the built environment, which is mainly the global ABC, our partners in the building community. And for us, we said that this is not a constituency work. This is a sector for mitigation. And we said that this should not be a cities group, but it should be a waste and consumption group, so that waste and consumption could also be addressed as a mitigation sector. Then we had the Madrid, an climate ambition coalition was announced. We said that we want to be part of it. And Race to Zero came up. The way Race to Zero came up has got nothing to do with those Marrakesh partnership agendas. In Glasgow, of course, this was reaching to its peak, but it was also a bit interesting because the breakthrough agendas from Glasgow was not adopted at the Glasgow Climate Pact. There was a resistance from the national governments. Instead, they pushed this to the breakthrough agenda to the footnote. When we come here to Sharm el-Sheikh, the champions announced actually three main things. One, an adaptation agenda, which was something that Africa was asking for, including race to resilience, of course. Second, a breakthrough agenda. And in the breakthrough agenda, they have two different breakthroughs. One, the ones that are by nations, 5 sectors. These are the national governments who announced their collaboration. And among them, there is no buildings breakthrough yet. The second breakthroughs was 2030 breakthroughs by non-party stakeholders, which is announced under 6 sectors. Again, some of them are a bit new to us. We have to just understand what's going on. But imagine that Surge was announced in the middle of this redesign of the whole action agenda. So obviously we have to understand how things will evolve in the future, but it is very clear, especially in the next year's presidency, when we work with the presidents, we have to be very clear how do they work with the champions and how to relate their champions agenda, because it is very clear the action agenda is something that has to be really built around the breakthroughs and adaptation. So we have lot of lessons learned actually from this experience. Concluding remarks towards COP28. As I said, many of us are still coming back from COP27. Some of are on the way, some of are ill, some of have taken their holidays. So it's too early to define a roadmap. But here are a couple of points. First of all, we believe we do not need to reinvent a new logo or new brand. Multi-level action delivers is still relevant, especially now climate justice is also included. We have to operationalize Surge. We have to build on what the support we have received so far. We have to make sure this is now becoming into an action agenda, action-oriented agenda. And we have to discuss what it means in the high-level champions breakthrough agendas. At certain moment in time, I remember Nigel was saying about, oh, why don't we create an urban breakthrough? So maybe in the next iteration of Surge, there may be some additional moves. As you have seen, these agendas have always evolved every year. So there was never a phase that something is announced in 1 year and it stayed there forever. There was always adjustments and changes. So knowing such a strong endorsement from the global North and South, it is possible to consider Surge could be an urban breakthrough agenda at COP28 or beyond. It is important, in order to achieve this, we have to see the synergy and overlap between the second UN Habitat Assembly on the 5th to 9th of June and SP58 in Bonn. When I say synergy or overlap, it is really, as you have seen the dates, the first week of the UN negotiations in Bonn overlaps with the UN Habitat Assembly in Nairobi. Of course, this is a challenge that especially UN Habitat community has to address, and this also influences us. Therefore, we wish we could be more active in the second week of Bonn so that we don't lose the momentum of the climate COP in the UNFCCC technical year-round discussions. And that will very likely be overlapping with the daring cities. And of course, we also have to check with the incoming presidency, the United Arab Emirates, whether they wish to continue this legacy of urbanization climate ministerial. We are relatively hopeful because, as you may have noticed, United Arab Emirates is also a federal government. In the federal governments, there is more and more recognition of this kind of bottom-up initiatives. So it could be possible that UAE could also be willing to host this. Let's hope that this will be possible and that we will build on our success in Sharm el-Sheikh. we have to be part of the loss and damage fund discussion and design, and particularly we have to support, we have to connect to Scotland. At the COP27, we have our host of our pavilion, Scotland, have made a very important announcement, meetings with Prime Minister of Barbados, with the announcement of their guidelines for loss and damage. I think as a collectively as LGMA councils, we have to take us up further so that these proposals are much more heard into the design of loss and damage fund as well. We also shared this with other constituencies as well. Obviously, as I said, Dubai will be a bit different than Sharm el Sheikh. There is a much more established administration in Dubai. Dubai is a member of C40. In Egypt, there were no membership to any of those international networks. Dubai also has a lot of opportunities to offer in the green zone, which is the city area. So we have to see what will be the priorities of Dubai and how will we work with them. Obviously, there is a huge appetite from all partners that the multi-level action pavilion should continue and very likely even expand its capacity, its features. We have to focus on Article 6.8. Finance is important. Once again, as LGMA, our dream scenario would be that sustainable urbanization is noted as a non-market approach, and it could say maybe including facilities like local, because for us, local is one of the tools that can help this. But obviously, local is on the table of the COP27 drafting documents. Let's see how we will evolve. We have to work with our colleagues from UN Capital Development and others. And finally, stocktake for climate emergency. We can use this as the momentum to introduce a political momentum to the global stocktake. Here is once again, we have had this dialogue with the Talanoa space. We would like to suggest that in every city and every region, we can have 1 or 2 days of these kind of discussions, which can focus on the national NDC and its relevance to your urban and local context. What is your local energy commitment, and how do you address climate justice at home, domestically, and globally? This is also a success that we achieved in June. The UNFCCC is looking forward to us that we host those stocktake or local stocktakes that we feed into the process. In terms of the timeline, I think would be key moment will be the Earth Day 2023, the June, daring cities and the UNFCCC, October, the Urban October, and possibility of global multi-level stocktakes, and Dubai. And while we are organizing this, we recommend that our partners should take into account the outcomes of the IPCC AR6 summary, the summary for urban policymakers. They should connect to the youth, UNGO. We have had some discussions with them, their local conference of youth, and legislative bodies like GLOBE, so that multi-level action is truly reflected into these discussions. With this, I think I've come to my results, end of my presentation. I see some points raised in the QA. Kobe, before going to, oh my God, if Jan François is correct, it was only me and there was no slides being shown. Is that correct? Kata, can you help me?
Yeah, you
Yes.
weren't. I tried to tell you in the chat.
Fantastic. Good. What I just sort of suggest, yes, there were slides and you didn't see any of them. I will share this immediately after this, and I will make sure that such a mistake is not happening in the afternoon session. Kobe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yunus. And we only have a few minutes left, 15, 20 minutes. And I'm afraid that I do not have slides, but we are going to provide a lot of links in the chat box. So please keep an eye out on the chat box, as we will be providing several important links. We are now in the midst of the final 2 weeks ahead of excuse me, ahead of COP15, and things are just going a little bit crazy. That's why I'm coming to you today without slides, but things are really starting to fall into place, and there's big excitement in our community, in our constituency for COP15, which is of course a defining COP for the biodiversity and nature space altogether. Excuse me. Okay, so what I would like to say is just a quick reflection on COP27 moving to COP15. From an African perspective, we feel that there was a lot of focus in our pavilion on the African agenda, but not also in our pavilion, in our constituency. We feel that Egypt really created the space for the African agenda to come through, and many of our constituency partners voiced the same. I think the African voice also came out strongly in the negotiations. That's with my Africa hat on. We also really commend the idea of these thematic days, because they were exceptional, and many of them for the first time, like food, for instance, got the space that it required in the global climate negotiations. And we hope this trend can also continue into the future. It was also very important for us to see that nature was featured. I think I didn't attend a single session where nature or nature-based solutions was not part of the discussion somehow. Of course, finance was there as well, as it should be, but nature was there in a bigger way than ever before. And we also think that this linking of the Rio conventions is something that needs to happen much more strongly. And we also heard many people speaking about the poly crisis and how to address the poly crisis, and that it should not be addressed in a singular agenda, but that the agendas should come together. And this is, of course, the message that our constituency will take through, bringing the climate message and these other agendas right through into the nature agenda and the biodiversity COP. Biodiversity COP15 is very important for many reasons, but mostly because it is where the global biodiversity framework for the future generation and towards 2050 will be adopted by the parties, and there is great progress being made around this specific global biodiversity framework, although a lot is still in brackets, and there are negotiations, specific negotiations set up. An extraordinary open-ended working group number 5 is set up for the days just ahead of the COP itself, so that the negotiators can try and remove as many of the brackets as they can before the COP opens on the 7th of December. So that means that many of us will go early so that we can participate in those negotiations, because again, there is a group, just like we have in the space of climate, there is a group of negotiators that have been present from open-ended working group 1, in fact, carrying us through from COP14, which was also held in Sharm el-Sheikh. And now we are moving towards COP15, the second part of it. The first part of it already concluded, of course, as you know, without negotiations, but the first part of it did conclude in China. But now the second part is the negotiation where the GBF, Global Biodiversity Framework, is set to be adopted by the parties. Historic moment, people refer to it as the Paris moment for nature, and we certainly hope it will be. We're feeling very optimistic as a constituency about having a bigger and larger and more visible presence there than ever before. But also, when it comes to the negotiations, there is a one dedicated decision specifically focused on a renewed plan of action led by Scotland through the Edinburgh process, which has been a process supported by so many of you. The Committee of Regions, ICLEI supported it, Regions 4, the Goals Group, so many of the networks came forth and supported this whole entire process led by Scotland. And again, a big thank you to Scotland for leading that process, which ultimately led to the Edinburgh Plan of Action and the declaration signed by so many. And by the way, if you have not yet signed the Edinburgh Declaration, you can still, either as a party or as a individual city or regional government, you can still sign, or a partner, you can still sign the Edinburgh process or the Edinburgh Declaration coming out of the Edinburgh process, and put your name or your institution's name behind that process, which has led to the parties drafting and really having a consensus view around the need for a renewed and stronger plan of action to be adopted, which will give us, as a subnational constituency, a framework within which to negotiate, talk to, and the parties themselves, but also frame our work for the foreseeable future, at least for the next decade ahead. So it's very important for us that that particular decision goes through. That is up for decision in the first week of the COP, and that, which is great for us, because we hope that when we get to the summit, which is the middle weekend, we can already celebrate the good news that that decision is adopted. But of course, there are still things in brackets, and we have to follow the negotiations carefully, and we will be making interventions from our constituency, from the floor, to do all we can to see that decision coming through, but also the many other decisions that are interspersed throughout the global biodiversity framework, which has very strong reference to local and subnational governments by name. And that is laudable. That is really fantastic. We hope that we can get there with the climate decisions also in the future. But yet again, we are looking forward to that decision, and we'll be working hard on the advocacy side for that with all of you that are joining us. I must stress that the decision was made by Canada, who is now taking over the physical space of the COP. The COP presidency, of course, remains China, but Canada is providing the space in the Palais de Congrès in Montreal for the event to take place. And Canada made the decision because it was, it was quite late in the day, and there are cost factors, etc., that it will not be a virtual. Many parts of it will not be virtual. I think the negotiations, of course, can be followed virtually, but many of our events will not be live streamed virtually in a way that you can participate from afar, but you will be able to, for instance, look at our summit, which will be live streamed, but it won't be a participatory live streaming that happens there. So we won't be able to call people in as we did in Sharm el-Sheikh now for the climate COP. So the open-ended working group 5 will take place ahead of the formal COP15, and the formal COP15 dates, just to remind ourselves, is from the 7th. It starts on a Wednesday, 7 December to 19 December, ending on a Monday. And our pavilion, for the first time, we are very, very happy to say that we have a pavilion, and you can see the links there on the pavilion, that for the pavilion that's been already pasted by my colleagues in the webinar chat. Please follow that. It's a fantastic pavilion, very similar to the one that we had for our constituency now in Sharm el-Sheikh in the blue zone. This is also in the blue zone, very prominent space. It's actually a little bit bigger. Thanks very much to Quebec and to the ECBD, who gave us the space at no cost, and also to Quebec, who is funding the majority of the funds to make this pavilion possible altogether. So big thanks to Quebec, Montreal, ECBD, and everybody else that is making this space available for us. It has meeting rooms, it also has a press room, and it's of course got the normal seating arrangements as we can expect. And the pavilion program will run from the 8th, one day after the opening of the COP. It will start on the 8th and it will conclude on the 18th, one day before the COP closes as well. But there are many side events that were not that the SCBD could not accommodate, so we may keep the pavilion open till the 19th to accommodate some of those side events to take place in our pavilion. So those discussions are ongoing. We also have an unofficial side event as ICLEI and partners, and our focus of that side event on the 7th of December will focus directly on the main issue of the day. How do we finance scaled action? And we are using Cities with Nature, Regions with Nature as the big umbrella initiatives where all of us come together and take action with cities, and more cities are signing up to that, and more regions are signing up to Regions with Nature on a daily basis. And they obviously are ready to take action. They're already taking action. They're reporting their plans and their actions and their commitments on the action platform of Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature. And we encourage those who are not yet doing that to please start doing that, because that's how we can demonstrate to the world that collectively our constituency is already at the forefront and taking action on the ground. But what they need is scaled ability to do much more of that. And this is where the finance discussion comes in. So our side event will focus very much on that issue. And then I would also just like to mention that is on the 7th. Then I would like to mention that the pavilion starts opening on the 8th, but there with an opening session, and then immediately goes into a Montreal Day. Montreal is one of our main co-hosts, and Montreal will organize this day specifically around their key partners, their key sister twinning cities, etc. And we can expect really big and exciting announcements coming out of the Montreal Day. On the second day, on the 9th, we have a Quebec Day. The Quebec Day will most likely take place mainly in French, and it is not only focused on Quebec, but it is bringing partners from around the world, more from the Francophone world, together to work with Quebec. And it is a jam-packed program on the 9th. And then we do, then the 10th, we have a full day of sessions on the 10th. And as per custom, those leaders, those subnational and local leaders, here I'm referring to the governors and the mayors, will have a closed dinner meeting on the evening of the 10th, where they will agree on the outcome statement or communique, which will be presented to the high-level segment in the second week of the COP. And that closed working dinner is open for all people who are there in person, who are leaders of local and subnational governments. That happens on the 10th, so that they can get to a consensus statement as leaders of subnational and local governments, and present that to the plenary later on during the COP. And then on the 11th and the 12th, the pavilion is closed. The reason for that is that we then have our very high-level summit, which is drawing tremendous attention from around the world. We already have over 1,000 delegates that have registered for the summit. And of course, they all need to get accredited by the COP, and this process is underway. Some people are still waiting for their COP accreditation letters, and we are in talks with the CBD Secretariat to speed up those letters, because it's with those letters that they finally can book their tickets and apply for their visas. We are aware that time is short, and so is the SCBD, who's responsible for those letters, and they are promising us that these letters will be released at a much quicker pace than up to now. So the summit program is also the link for the summit program. It's already on our website, and the link is available here in the chat group for you. The summit theme is taking action for biodiversity, and it will focus on taking action for biodiversity through 3 elements mainly. And the 3 elements are engage, influence, and act. And here you can see the link for the summit program. It's a very filled program with rich announcements, new announcements, a very big focus on the influence and the act. And there you can expect that there's going to be fantastic new news and new initiatives being announced and activated at that summit. And then, of course, after the summit, we carry on. We're now moving into the high-level segment of the COP. The summit takes place on the 11th and the 12th of December. Those are 2 days that are closed for the negotiations. And that's normally when the CBD is so kind to us to make space available in one of the negotiation halls. So we'll actually sit in one of the negotiation halls, probably almost fill it now that we have so many registrations. And we will speak there as if we are the parties for that weekend, so to speak. We will take over the space for that weekend, and that the summit will then conclude on the 12th, and on the 13th our pavilion kicks into its second week of activities, right from the 13th to the 18th. Every day will be filled with sessions. There are so many people who want to take be part of sessions and take part in the pavilion. We thank you for that. If you still feel that you want to be there, please talk to us, contact us, because we can possibly still slot you in here and there in a pavilion session. Unfortunately, the summit is already jam-packed and very full, but the pavilion is very high level. It's fantastic. It's very well located, and many of our governors and mayors, etc., will be there engaging the finance sector, just very much in a similar way as we were so active in Sharm el-Sheikh with our pavilion at COP27. So we welcome you all to that pavilion, which again, as I say, is made possible by Quebec and Montreal. And our partners there are Regions for the SCBD themselves and ICLEI, but also additional partners are Kunming City, which was going to be the host city of the COP, should it have taken place in China, the second part of it. And Kunming and the Chinese delegation is bringing a very large delegation of cities and subnational governments to the COP, so they will be very active. So the day, the 13th, is basically the day that is dedicated to China and Chinese cities. And I know, I'll keep it a surprise for now, but I know that there's a very big announcement coming that is going to be a fantastic new additional global opportunity for all of us on biodiversity coming from China on that day. And there will also be awards made for outstanding actions taken by Chinese cities on that day. So I won't say too much more, because there are many announcements, many things that we are looking forward to come through out of the 2 weeks in Quebec, in Montreal. And I don't want to spoil the fun, but be there, because otherwise you're going to miss out. And the summit, I just want to say, will be live broadcasted, and it will be available in 4 languages. The 4 languages, thanks also to China and Kunming and UNEP, who are helping to finance this translation. The 4 languages are English, French, Chinese, and Spanish. Those are the 4 languages in which it will be broadcasted live. So if you can, for one other reason, not be there, please tune in and join us at the summit. The pavilion sessions, only some of them will be broadcasted live, not all of them. Not all of them will be broadcasted live, and not all of them will have translations. This is up to the organizers of the individual events, whether they are putting in funds to enable that or not. But most of them will take place in 1 language. They will be recorded, however, and they will appear on our website, on our LGMA website. Basically, all the proceedings will appear there, and that is the website that has also been posted in this chat group. So I want to just, out of time, but I just want to say that we have activated a WhatsApp group for the LGMA, and you can see the link there. Click on the link, sign up so that you can stay up to date with news, with the latest things, just as we use the WhatsApp group so effectively in Sharm el-Sheikh. And then also there is a sign up for a daily digest, daily news digest. Please sign up to that as well. All those things will be posted, all the news coming out, all the negotiation news, but also information about the sessions and so on will come out in those updates. So Eunice, I think with this, I should stop now and say thank you very much for the opportunity. We are now getting ready. We're in the last straight for the summit. We are also very pleased that very high level delegates have accepted to, and even asked to be there. Many UN leaders will be there. Many government leaders will be there at all levels of government, also national government leaders, and we thank them all for that. Many of our partners will be there. The banks, the finance people, everybody we need to talk to will be there together, and we're hoping for a very, very good outcome of COP15 for our constituency. I think our constituency has shown that we're ready to take action for climate change on the one hand, with nature being part of that solution, but also for nature and biodiversity on the other hand, with benefits for climate, for food, for people, for so many other very important agendas. And of course, the gender agenda is very much part of our entire 2-week outreach there, and we are trying to bring gender balance into all the sessions, and I think we're achieving that very much. Maybe perhaps not in all, but in by far the majority of these sessions. So thank you, Yunus. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Kobe. Thank you, Kobe. We wish you the best of success and luck to all delegations attending the Paris COP. Coming to the end of this hour, is there any colleagues who would like to mention any points, especially those who are in COP27? If you wish to share any insights, feel free to add here. Maybe we should also underline that the session, the recorded sessions, will also be available in the Pavilion website soon, for those who'd like to watch later on. If not, I think we can conclude this session. I see no hands or no additional points. Once again, sorry for the confusion with the screen sharing. That was my mistake, but we will share with you the slides after this webinar is the second version in the afternoon, 4 p.m. and that you will receive all the presentation we've gone through. Thank you very much and have a nice day to all of you.